Hey there, readers, writers, and friends. Story Serpent here, and today we are talking about Max in the House of Spies by Adam Gidwitz. It is a middle grade historical adventure story, and it tells us right on the cover it is a tale of World War II. And it was published in March of 2024 by Dutton's Children's Books, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House. But before we get into all of that, today's random words are like, share, subscribe, espionage. So what does the book have to tell us about itself? Max does not want to be sent to London. He's never left Berlin. He barely speaks English. He doesn't want to live with strangers. Most of all, he doesn't want to leave his parents. On the Kindertransport boat to England, Max has never felt more alone. Until he meets two unexpected traveling companions, a kobold named Berg and a Dybbuk named Stein. Germany is becoming more and more dangerous for Jewish families, but Max is still determined to go home. He's hatching a plan to get back to Berlin. It merely involves accomplishing the impossible, convincing the British to make him a spy. The first book in a duology, Max in the House of Spies, is a thought-provoking World War II story as only acclaimed storyteller Matt Gidwitz can tell it. Fast-paced and hilarious, with a dash of magic and a lot of heart. That is actually a fantastically apt description. I feel like for once the back cover blurb is telling us all the things we need to expect. We know that Max is Jewish, and his Jewish experience in Berlin is going to feature heavily in the book, as it should. We know that Max is going to try and do the impossible. He's going to become a spy. And because of the way this story arc goes, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, it's really important to set that expectation for your young readers. As far as the outer trappings go, we have Berg and Stein, or Stein and Berg. They're almost identical. We're not really sure which is which, but they're hanging out here on his shoulders on this gorgeous cover. Very kind of spy thriller, noir, with a dash of comic book going on. Definitely the sort of thing that is going to get a young reader's attention. It's matte finished, and as you can see as we slip this out, top secret embossing on the hardcover. Just gorgeous, so much fun. So even if you lose that beautiful dust jacket, this book is still going to draw attention. It's got these beautiful maroon end papers. Super fun title page illustration that has our fantastical elements, the Dybbuk and the kobold hanging out in the front with us. Now here in the back of the book are some features that I think make this an especially good read for teachers, for schools, for librarians doing young readers book clubs, and for anyone homeschooling. How much of this story is real? And he goes through all of the different aspects of the story that are most significant, kind of a who's who. Who did I make up? Who was real? How much do I know about this? And then, because, oh my goodness, this man knows what gets to a little bookworm's heart, there is an annotated bibliography in the back. And with each one of his primary sources, he says which ones would be appropriate for students, which ones he specifically recommends teachers read before they teach the subject, and which primary sources are probably best for adults only. Is a fantastic resource that he provides with this book, which, if we remember a previous video I did, this is what real historical fiction looks like. And if you're not willing to do that work, don't make historical history your analog. You gotta do the work, and this man has done the work. It's fantastic. Binding is really excellent, so all of the outer trappings of this thing tell us this is a well-researched book, and it is going to be solid. As far as the what's going well, we always start with the prose, and let me tell you, it does not disappoint. Just check out these first couple of sentences. Once there was a boy who had two immortal creatures living on his shoulders. That was the fourth most interesting thing about him. And if that doesn't make you want to devour this book whole, the Story Serpent thinks you're a little dumb. I have a feeling that most eager, especially young male readers, will read those first two sentences and go, I am in, and they will want to know more immediately. And the prose throughout, it is clear. We get the distinction between Max's voice when the third, because it's third person omniscient for Max for the most part, but we do occasionally get a little head hop since his fantastical creature friends are living on his shoulders. And it's done so seamlessly that you don't even notice it's happening. It's done really, really well. So we get Max's voice, which is very thoughtful. He's very contemplative. He is a technical genius doing all kinds of interesting things that I think young readers would aspire to being able to do. But at the same time, he's still a kid, and he is still making those daring, interesting, skillful decisions. He's demonstrating his capability in a way that makes sense for a 12-year-old. And when we're switching back and forth between characters, the humor is on point. A lot of young readers, let's face it, they like bathroom humor. They like silly, crude jokes. That's where, those are the things that are surprising to them. Therefore, they're amused by it. Their understanding of those things is relatively new, but it's just sufficiently nuanced that they can find it funny. This book does an incredible job of weaving things like that into the story in a way that both makes sense, but doesn't quite break the tension when you're in very serious, dangerous situations. And at the same time, this book takes its subject matter very seriously. Topics like the crystal knocked, the night of broken glass, the treatment of Jews in Germany, the struggles against anti-Semitism that existed in Britain at the time. All of these things are taken very seriously throughout the story, but the humor is so well done. It's placed just perfectly so that no young reader is going to get bored with this. It's not too serious, and it's not quite scary until the end. But there is tension. There's a great deal of tension that is really well built over the course of the story. And the chapter endings always make you want to read on. I think Gidwitz is masterful at ending a chapter in a way that makes you feel like, if I don't read the next one, I might explode. And that's the kind of response you want, especially from young readers whose distraction-prone teeny whittle brains are very likely to notice a dust mote floating through the sun and get distracted on the same order as a cat might. So you want books that keep them reading, that make them want to delve in and turn those pages and not surface for air until some adult tells them they absolutely have to. In terms of the characters, Max, our point of view character, is enigmatic, thoughtful, smart, very kind, and we know this from the very beginning. He is set up expertly so that we care about Max and we want to follow him throughout the story. Like I said, Berg and Stein, his fantastical friends who are now living on his shoulders, who are like, we're leaving Berlin too, this place is terrible, was their reason for hopping aboard Max. But he's now schlepping them around with him, and the way the two play off each other, the way they are asking Max about his motivations for things, it allows us to get a sense that it's okay that we don't understand Max all the time, because neither do Berg and Stein. We are just seeing some of his behaviors from the outside, so when we get the payoff of finding out what he's doing, why he's doing it, we get to be as excited and surprised as Berg and Stein are. It's a wonderful way to let kids know it's okay to not know what's going on right this second. It will pay off later. You're not the only one who's confused right now. And I think that is a wonderful way to teach kids that sometimes books have a steep learning curve. You have to hang around with what's going on for a little while before you understand. And as long as it's executed well, I think it's a real blessing, especially in middle grade literature, where kids are learning how to do that along with the characters in the book. And blessed, blessed, blessed day. If I had confetti, I would throw it. The adults in this book are smart. This book is packed full of smart, worldly adults who are just very busy trying to win a war, trying to manage a large estate, trying to be a communist activist, whatever. We'll talk about it. But these adults are all adults behaving like adults in adult situations. They are making both good and bad choices. Some of them are not good people. They make bad choices. They do mean-spirited things on occasion, particularly Max's teachers. But one, that makes it super satisfying when Max gets his revenge. But the fact that Max can continue to be smart, he can outwit people, he can maneuver among kids his age, while relying on the adults to be the adults in the room, is such a blessed example, especially since many of the adults, they're men. We have nothing short of 5 excellent male role models. Men who are active, they are engaged, they are worldly, they are smart, they are capable, they are out there doing good things. Now, are all of them perfect? No. And in fact, do we see examples of males who are behaving in ways that are anti-Semitic, ways that are ugly, ways that are hateful and maybe even a little ignorant? Yeah, all of that is present. But we can weigh them against the good examples that are there. And it gives kids the opportunity to see, oh, yes, when a person behaves that way, that is not good. When a person behaves that way, that is good. And it has nothing to do with their maleness. Our characters are characters. They are fully fleshed out. They are not pigeonholed, sad, two-dimensional puppets of what a human being ought to be. And that made reading this book a joy for me and something I would gladly hand to a child. What I love about the story is that it starts small. We get to know Max. We get to know his immediate environment. We watch him trying to adjust to various levels of society. He goes from the new household he's in to the school he has to exist in with his, I guess we'll call them foster brothers, his host family. And it's difficult. It's a struggle for him to adapt. He doesn't go straight into trying to be a spy. He starts with, how do I adapt here? And he's looking for the opportunity of, how do I go home? And that builds over the course of the book, so that when Max eventually goes off to the House of Spies, as is the title's promise, we see that as being a progression that makes sense. Max has proven to us, the readers, that he deserves the chance to be there. It's not some grandiose, he was chosen out of the sky, he is the one, like, no. Max found a way in. Max was clever, and it got him on the wrong side of some consequences to begin with. That's another thing. This story has consequences for everyone. And it doesn't pull back on the fact that when you go leaping into situations you don't understand, oftentimes there are consequences that are unexpected. And it makes the end of the book startling and engaging. And I need the sequel now, Adam, right now. I need a release date for book 2 now. Do you hear me? And like I said with the world building, everything is going well in the world building of this book. It creates very realistic, very detailed situations. Obviously, this author has researched the Blitz really, really well. He helps us understand how the English normalized the fact that there were bombs falling from the sky every day, how their behaviors changed and adapted, how adaptable they were. Can you imagine that? A story for kids written in the last year that's about how to be adaptive in difficult situations rather than falling on the ground and wailing about how victimized you are? stunning, right? And on top of that, Gidwitz is very careful to show the many sides of what was going on. All of this is happening in the early fog of war. They don't know how bad things are going to be in Germany. They're hearing just as disturbing things coming out of Russia, and they're very aware that Stalinist Russia, not a great place to be. They make that point in the book, despite the fact that one of Max's new uncles is openly a communist and is very often talking about how great communism is and why can't everyone see that he's just trying to be compassionate, etc., etc. And he's a very charming, likable fellow who takes a liking to Max. But Max learns very quickly that everyone has their own agenda, and that includes the people he likes. Kids being able to learn that, very important, but I also think it's a lesson that's better served to a slightly older reader. You're going to see that this comes into play when I give you my final rating. It might surprise you. So what's not working with this book? I think it might actually be trying to do too much. There is an aside kind of in the middle of the book where we are introduced to the guard at the entrance of the House of Spies. And he is a black man from Trinidad who joined the English military despite having stood against the English military in Trinidad, and we get a great big explanation of all of those events. Maybe a little oversimplified, but I'm not sure it's necessary. And the fact is, the horrors of colonial slavery in the Caribbean, that's a pretty intense topic, and I'm not sure it's appropriate for an 8-year-old. Now, that might just be me going, okay, when we're revealing the realities of the world to our children, do we shy away from difficult things? No, but we introduce them to them in layers. And I honestly think that this particular, shall we call it sub-story, kind of takes away from the themes of the rest of the book. And it's as if this book is very carefully telling Max, your problems are not the worst problems, which I think is a horrible thing to take away. Like, you can't think that you have it bad right now because of this other thing that happened. I'm just not, it just doesn't land right with me. I feel like there's a way to do this topic for young readers, but it really needs a story of its own to do that. And, if Adam Gidwitz, as, a white man living in Brooklyn, doesn't feel like that's his story to tell, I get it. But also maybe don't necessarily include it here. And maybe work with a fellow author, maybe help somebody else develop the kind of story that you think would help bring that information to light. I just think it's too much. And if you send a kid down that particular rabbit hole, that's some really grisly stuff. We're already trying to help them understand World War II. Really grisly stuff. And I think it's really easy to overtell kids how bad the world is. Because one of the things that's amazing about childhood is your capacity for wonder, awe, and optimism. And while we do want to teach our kids hard things, we also want to foster that wonder, awe, and optimism. This tale of Caribbean slavery feeds into one of the things that thematically bothered me. There were two things that I just went, And one of them is there's a huge Britain's kind of bad sign over all of this book. Max is confronted again and again and again with how terrible Great Britain as a country is. He likes a lot of the people. He doesn't like others. judges people for their wealth very quickly too. But a lot of the messaging that he is receiving is how terrible the English are. And again, I don't think that serves that message. I'm not sure it serves our children. We as adults need to understand bad things happened in the past. Some of the nations we are currently allied with or currently belong to were part of those bad things, but we all agree they were bad, right? We're not going to let ourselves slip back into that. And behaving as if bad thing is unique to this one place makes it really easy to dismiss bad thing is happening over here right now in reality, like there being more slaves on planet Earth currently than there have been in any previous time in human history. But that gets ignored and swept under the rug because Great Britain once enslaved people and is therefore very, very bad, and you must not forget this, you must remember this. Do we really need to be doing that to our kids? I don't think so. Moreover, no one in this book is painted as being entrepreneurially spirited. They're not being shown as earning their wealth, using their wealth well, unless they're an eccentric kook who also happens to own a zebra. The anti-capitalist, anti-wealth messaging that is throughout this is really bothersome. Max, in fact, characterizes a bored cruelty as being the hallmark of either the very wealthy or the very stupid. And he's pretty sure the boys he's going to school with right now are both. And it's just a really unfair characterization. And I don't know that it would necessarily hold up. The fact that he doesn't find any other comrades to talk to except for the one Indian-born kid. Which, notice that the book doesn't get into Britain's super bad because of India, because that thing would invite the whole, maybe the caste system there wasn't great either, and Britain coming in and trying to shake that up actually ended up being positive over the long run. That's obviously a very complicated issue that Gidwitz does not want to deal with, and so he doesn't bring it into the book. And the fact that he doesn't do that, but he does bring in the Trinidadi colonialization, again, it feels shoehorned in. The Story Serpent doesn't like it. Overall, The Story Serpent gives Max in the House of Spies a split rating. From ages 8 to 11, it gets a mostly meh from me because I really think it's something that needs to be read with an adult. You need to have a teacher guiding this along. You need to have conversations every now and again about what do they think about what this character did. What do you think about this topic? They need to be guided through some of these things, and they need an adult to help remind them just because someone has money doesn't make them a bad human. Just because a nation did some bad things doesn't mean we should despise them, especially not their people. I think it's really important that we make those distinctions for our kids, especially if you're going to let a younger kid read this. Also, there's some pretty brutal descriptions of historical events in here that I think would disturb young readers especially. So if your kid's 8, 9, this is definitely a read with an adult, and therefore it gets a mostly meh. But for ages 12 and up, this gets a pitch perfect. This is a fantastic book to introduce the horrors of World War II, the fact that anti-Semitism was everywhere, not just in Germany at the time, and the struggles that the Jewish people had, and bringing light to the struggle of the Jewish people is something we really need to be doing within our own culture right now. I also think, tip to teachers, if you have an older student, 14, 15, who struggles with reading, has a lower reading level, they might find this book way more engaging than most of the things that would be at an appropriate reading level for them. It's interesting, it's fun, it's got a great historical foundation. I think it's a great read for your older teens who struggle with reading. Anyway, that's all I have for today. If you have a story you would like to see the Serpent take on, feel free to put it down in the comments. Until we meet again, read on, write on, and stay sharp.